Good afternoon, Southern Institutions. It is Thursday, April 13th. We are going to keep on working on the capital bill. We have in here today BGS and the AOA for some chats about a few different things. So who would like to go first as far as who'd like to go first?
Where would you like to start, Mr. Chair?
Well, I'd like to start on lines 14 and lines 15 on section 2 on the capital bill.
That's Joe Asia.
Okay. So, Joe Asia, welcome. Welcome to Southern Institutions. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be back. For the record, Joe Aja, Director for Design and Construction at BGS.
Okay, so we've got you in here. We're starting to go down through this bill a little bit. We're starting to get some things ironed out. We've had some good newses. We're doing some plug and play here. And so we're on the State House expansion here. We got $250,000 there for some planning monies and stuff. It sounds like we might clip that just a little bit. We're looking for a few little funds here and there, but tell us, Joe, tell us about that and tell us how far along you are, how determined that money is, and all of that. Tell us about that State House expansion and what it's going for, what it's going to do, and all of that.
Okay. Presently, we are in the planning phase. We did go out to bid for an RFP, request for proposal, to do all the design as we knew it. And that what would centered around was the ARPA funding. And so the ARPA funding, we clearly stated in the final rule that we could not just do an expansion. So to get to a point of expansion, if it is needed, we're going through all these steps to evaluate the existing space. And that was based on spacing for the pandemic, whatever that spacing would be. Back in the day, it was for the legislatures here, they were using a 7-foot diameter circle. Just about everybody else was 6, and it dropped down to 3. So they're working on what exactly that spacing is going to be, along with our HVAC work that's going on that would provide the proper airflow for the number of occupants in the building. And so right now we're in our planning space. They have gone through and done some additional surveys of certain personnel throughout the building to get their thoughts and everything else out through the pandemic. Also included in this was not only just spacing for committees, but also the rear entrance that was used as the accessible entrance. It's the only one that we have that is 100% accessible, except for the one here by the Lincoln bus hallway. However, they were looking to maybe the legislature looking to make that as more of a secure entry point to the building that is located in that location, and everybody coming in. And so that's also part of this, what we're evaluating as a whole. There are a few other smaller items that are included in that also, but those are the 2 major components. And so that project amount for our architect for what is known today was for $708,537. We have received $1.5 million in ARPA money. So that leaves us with a balance of some $800,000.
Mr. Chairman, I just think that this is really important about ARPA dollars. So ARPA dollars were allocated for this.
Yep.
What is really important to know, and I talked about this last time I was in here, this is all about health and safety. That's the way that they're looking at this, right? And they're going to do a process of elimination. So some of the things that have happened during the pandemic, they're going to look to institutionalize. They don't want to do construction. We don't need to in terms of the ARPA dollars. So what that means is it'll be things like, the legislature took Tuacan, for example, and they will look to say, well, can you displace anything in Tuacan, right, that then allows you to utilize the space a little bit more effectively? Well, during those 2 years, you guys also had the connector, for example. So it's going to look at what you did specifically during the pandemic And it will lead to take those into considerations and then say, above and beyond that, we still think you need additional space. So I just want to be clear that the ARPA dollars are limited, and at the end of the planning and programming phase, if the study finds that we can accommodate within what you already have underneath your own jurisdiction, it will not recommend doing an expansion.
Okay.
So the ARPA dollars are limiting to you. If you want to move beyond that, if that were the outcome, you would need a different funding source to continue to progress that project.
Okay, so I guess that's one of the things that's been asked a couple times by a couple on the committee is that what's driving the State House expansion? So it's above and beyond the exploration. I mean, there are some fact finding that we need to find out to maybe leverage some more money, or that they're asking us to make sure that we have proper spacing.
That's correct, but there's other things that you did too, right? You allowed people to go remote. Right? So that's one of the things that they'll look at. What tools did you use, right, to operate and function during the pandemic? That's what they're going to look at. Were there any hardships from that? They'll consider that, but they're also going to look at what you did specifically during the pandemic. And they'll go to that first before they move on to say, yes, you need to expand beyond that.
Okay. Joe, anything else to add?
The programming planning phase is going to be complete end of June, is what we're hearing right now from the consultants. So at that point in time, you do get a peek at the program as to what we have to date for the future of this project. However it pans out, and be able to provide that feedback before we go into schematic design. Based on what we know today with the program that we laid out in the request for proposal, is that they then would have schematic design completed by the end of November. And then the next phase would be design development, and that's roughly a year of what they're planning for. So not only in the House bill, there is a committee to come back in during the summer session and meet if need be to go over this. Fully intend to do that and be ready for that, and then that would be the next step. It could be that with the options that are on the table, we like this one, we don't like this one, or something even different. Depends on how it all turns out. But there's a lot to look at.
So we appropriated, I think last year, correct me if I'm wrong, $500,000, and that came from ARPA funds to move that along.
No, we had 1.8 million out of the general fund
Okay.
last year for all ARPA dollars.
Oh.
So right now, we're only operating on ARPA dollars. This is the first amount of potential state funds that are.
Are those funds expended already? The 1.8?
I've encumbered 708,000.
Right.
That is it of the ARPA funds. So there's still another.
What can those funds be used for in ARPA? Anything as far as in the State House expansion plan?
It is just for the state house, and we're not calling it expansion, it's mitigation, because of the whole way that the ARPA funding is working. You can't do an expansion off of this, so we have to go through those steps. And that's all it is for, is to see whether or not we can do anything at the end of this study that still would comply with the ARPA.
Is that monies available for doing what you're asking for the 250,000, or what the House is asking for the 250,000? Is that monies of the remaining of the 1.8? Is any of that monies available for the planning and development of what you're asking? What's being asked for here?
It's a trick question because it's going to depend
Well, I'm
on.
not trying to trick you, so.
No, but it depends, it's gonna depend on what the outcome is from planning and programming. If the outcome is, yes, we find you need more space, you can continue to access that 1.8 million. If the finding is, no, we don't think you need an expansion, we think you can do your pandemic mitigation within the confines of this building or any other spaces that you have in the complex, you will not be able to access that funding anymore. You will be done with the ARPA dollars and you'll need a different funding source. I believe, though I don't want to speak for Madam Chair, for House Corrects and Institutions, I believe that's why she put the money into the bill. So if the outcome was you can't use any more of the ARPA dollars, you come to a stopping point, then now you have a different funding source to continue to progress that into design and development. So I think she did it as an insurance to make sure that it could still move forward regardless of what the outcome is, if there's a desire to continue to move it forward by the legislature.
Okay, so I get that. Was that clear to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I could, if the 250 became 150, what sort of impact would that have on the plans and designs going forward? In other words, is it tremendously impactful or is it marginally impactful? Because the 100 is what we're looking at to go someplace else.
I don't know right off, however, right now, for what we know, I put in the request for proposal and we got back. The next phase, schematic design, right now is at 81,000. So if at the end of programming, we spent that and we have met ARPA funding, so we can pay those bills, our next step would be at 81,000. And so if we go the different tangent, just say ARPA says you don't need to expand, or maybe just a little room or something like that, and you want to go forth with a 4-room expansion or a whole addition on the, like over the cafeteria, the likes of that, then we would get a new price from a new proposal from the architect and say, what would it cost to go down this avenue? And if it's a large expansion, it would be more than the 81,000. Would it be more than 150? I'm not sure because I don't know what that end product is, but I think it really would be in that ballpark.
Okay. And that's still an FY24.
Yes.
And as I testified on Friday, one of the administration's concern is that they're using bonded dollars for that planning and design work, that 250, and we believe that's more appropriate use for cash fund.
Yeah.
Oral money to do that type of high level planning and design work.
Yeah. So I wonder. Okay, so thinking out loud here. If I wonder if we can, so that's, I appreciate that. So I wonder if somewhere in around here that we can swap those dollars or bonded dollars for cash dollars to make it whole. And so we'll be thinking about that, okay? And committee, we'll be thinking about maybe we can swap those around because again, we get to Senator Harrison's point. I'm always gonna make it Senator Harrison's point now because she raised that point about how that funds to be used. So we'll be thinking about that. I think it was very helpful, Joe, as far as to tell us what's driving this a little bit more. It's not just organic produced. There's a reason why that this is getting talked about and getting pushed further down the road. And Mr. Brown, I like those comments, and we're going to be maybe we'll be thinking about where we can do a little plug and play with that. Okay, so let's not forget about that.
Yeah.
Joe, anything else about the State House expansion?
No.
Okay. Are you good if we can move to the next one, which is the Newport line 15? We have 750,000 bonded dollars. We also have another $500,000 of cash. So we have 1.25 million. No, is it? It's 750. Yeah, so we have 1.25. So we have 750. So we have 1,050,000, right?
Mr. Chairman, we only, for the record, we only need what has been allocated as cash. We don't need the bonded dollars that are in there for the Newport project.
Thank you very much. Okay, we appreciate that very much. We'll we know what to do with that. Okay, thank you. Committee, any more questions about that? That was pretty clear.
Oh, that helps a lot.
That's quick.
It does.
We haven't got money that quickly, won't you?
Yeah, Christmas in April. Sections 1920 on the bill. Let's just see right here, pages 29 to 31. Let's just kind of go to that a little bit. Okay. So we want to spend a little time on some language on the bill as it came over from the House, and that is that's section 19. And maybe some sections 20. Well, it might be section 20. Well, we'll see. Is it 20, section 20? Okay. I want to make sure I get the right bill out here. So what we're concerned about, page 31. What we're concerned about is the, let's make sure we all have the right copy. And that says passed by the House. That's the one we're using. Okay, so page 31. So we have a couple concerns about selling some buildings, namely that, the time frame and the way that we're giving them the timeframes, as far as one being, the building right down here, the building right down here in town.
110 State
Yep,
Street, Mr.
yes.
Chairman.
So we're concerned about the year's time that we're going to give, and it just seems to be a very, very free amount of time that we're giving the city of Montpelier to make a decision.
Yeah.
And we're wondering if we could find some language from you folks, giving them the time to do, we're wondering if we could find some language from you folks to tighten that time frame up and what you think would be a more reasonable time.
Sure, that we agree, we share your concern that a year to invoke the right of first refusal and then additional time to negotiate the sale really would slow down the disposition of those properties. And so we were thinking 90 days to invoke just invoke the right of first refusal and then another 9 months to complete the details of the
Okay.
sale. Flexible within that time frame there, but thinking that would allow us to move quicker, on those properties. And if the city, either Burlington or Montpelier, because I think there's identical language for 108 Cherry and 110 State.
Now, Senators Harrison and Senator Brennan, they're serving on town boards and all of that you've served on in the past, and that is me as well, I've served on as well. 90 days to me seems fairly reasonable, because if you missed the first one because the timing wasn't right, and then you messed up on the second one, and then so you'd have the third meeting to talk about this and to move that forwards, and to whether they could make a decision on whether they wanted to do something like that. I mean, do you concur in any way, fashion, form, or comments about that?
Yes. The, the process that you described, Mr. Chair, as a real estate professional, where right of first refusal, I know, well, hey, I'm trying to raise my game. As you described, a regular process of the right of first refusal, and I don't know if the state is anticipating this or the department, would be the seller would get sale. It would put it up for sale with the understanding that there will be a right of first refusal, so that you get actual bids, so that you can determine.
I would defer to the commission.
I know,
process.
but the 90 days was based on that sort of process, so there would be something reasonable to decide whether or not to refuse, because the whole idea of right of first refusal is you're refusing at a certain price, right?
So I'll help with that conversation as the conversation that we had. So as Senator Harrison is correctly saying, what I said is, in the real estate world, what happens is that we go and list that building with the understanding that there's a right of first refusal. And what we do is we market that building under that contents of there and say, hey, there's a right of first refusal. So so somebody will come and they'll make a bid on that building, understanding fully that they might not be the winning bid, because we're going to go back to Montpelier and we're going to go back and offer that building to them, and that, for that price of what the bid is. And then, I mean, that's kind of how it works in the real estate world. What I would ask you guys is maybe to check with who you might use as a realtor and ask them if those confines of a timeline like that would work with them, or we can make that decision, because
Yeah, let me just finish it out. So that's what the private sector does. I'm sure you're aware of that. It's a little awkward for a state to do that, but the town needs something to refuse, right?
Yeah,
So
I would
we'll just 1 sec. So you could get appraisals, like that might be a good stand-in. So in that situation where the town knows that something is happening and has something to actually consider, I think the 90-day requirement for the town to respond is fine. But if the town doesn't have something to consider and it's a negotiation, that's when the time needs to be longer. I think it would be better to have a price for the town to refuse, but it needs to be a reasonable price.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're envisioning, is that 90 days would start from once the BGS commissioner provided notice to the municipality or the city that here's the right of first refusal and the price.
So we have had the properties appraised, so we have a value for 110 State Street.
Great.
There is statutory language for the BGS commissioner in terms of how I sell buildings, and it has to be market value and all of these things. So there's statutory language about basically what I can accept for an offer.
Yes.
So we've appraised the building. My plan was to issue a letter. We haven't had this since I've been here. So we're working in a little different than what you said, but
Yeah,
isn't
that's
fully
fine.
ironed out. What I had envisioned was that we would issue a letter to the town, a notice to the town, which would start the clock, which is really important because I want to start that clock as early as I can.
Yeah.
To your point, you want it, if the town is going to refuse, we'd like to have the ability to then put it on the market as quickly as we can. So that clock starts the day I issue the letter. So my plan was to issue the letter to the community, in this case, the city of Montpelier, issuing them a letter to say, are you interested in purchasing the property? This is the appraised value of the property. Please let me know if you'd like to purchase it or not.
And I do not have a problem at all with that. I mean, you've had the property fairly appraised. It's there, yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, the only thing is, if, in situations, like, you ought to have a standard procedure, right? So we ought to be thinking about situations where it's, I mean, that's probably a pretty expensive building too, but where a town might need to go out to vote for it. So I'm not thinking here, but what I'm thinking is, if the town could know that this is coming and just have some sort of initial notice before you do the appraisal, then the 90 days may be sufficient.
Well, but they have 90 days to make a decision, then they have 9 months after to do all of what you just said.
They can't do it all 90 days, they get the whole 9
All right, so they would have 90 days to say yes or no,
So-
and then you would have 9 months to
9 months
actually
to close
make the
it.
transaction.
Yeah.
That seems pretty long
Is
too,
this-
but that might be a bond.
Just, you know, like,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it has to, there's to be voted at town meeting.
Right,
or
right,
something authorized,
Yeah,
you know.
that
I
sounds
don't know how that-
reasonable.
And I could go along with that as well, as long as it was a time frame that worked with you folks and you thought that was okay.
All you gotta do is use the chair's approach that, I got 5 other buyers, you got 1 hour to make your decision. And it
You
works
keep on
out.
giving them an hour.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
I will just go on the phone today, that's what you got, I got smart buyers in the south, you got 1 hour to make mine.
It wasn't an hour, he said, I got another guy in the other room.
Well, I guess that was it. too.
Okay. So we could get some language in there for that, on 110 State Street, and we could do it like that. And would you be comfortable putting that language together for us?
Sure, we can put together some draft
Okay,
language.
and we appreciate that, and that way we get it right, we don't mess it up, and we get it, if you could get that to us, it'd be
Absolutely.
good. Okay,
And that would be the case.
now we're back, now we're gonna go to, 108 chair.
Okay, I was just gonna ask that.
So we have a couple multifaceted problems here.
That's on page 30.
So same process. Is that your same process that you're thinking 108 chair? Going to the city first,
That is
doing
correct.
that? Okay. We have some problems with the language and we wanted to make sure that you guys didn't have problems with language. And it just seemed to say that, that you guys, let me find the language, that you guys would work, what page is that?
31.
31, and prior to the sale of the building located at 108 Cherry Street in Burlington, the Departments of Buildings and General Services shall work with the city of Burlington to find another appropriate location in downtown Burlington to relocate state employees who provide client services. Now, okay, well, maybe that's just a small portion of it, but as far as we're concerned, we're moving the majority of those employees to Waterbury. So is this saying that you're not moving the employees to Waterbury? Is this saying that you're moving these all to?
And that was one of the clarifications on Friday, where we're keeping the client-facing service district office staff in Burlington, and the central office staff
Okay,
would be moving to Waterbury for the health department. And the breakout of that, really rough math here, is like 25% staying in Burlington
Okay.
and the other.
so this isn't gonna handicap you in any way by agreeing to this
We would
language?
provide some clarifying language to make it clear that it is the district office staff that we are
Okay,
keeping in the, that our intent is to keep in the Burlington.
and we appreciate that, and
Yeah.
so we can get that language in there. Committee, any questions? Go ahead, Art.
Yeah, I was just like to see it say client facing services on line 7, just adding that word would do a lot for me.
Okay.
I think everybody's providing client services directly,
And
but
just
it's
to
those
provide an
direct
update
ones,
to the
right?
committee, Commissioner Fitch and myself met with a team from the mayor's office on the potential sale of the building, and had a very good meeting. And through that, they are working with us and provided us a list of vacant commercial space in Burlington. And we actually have a team of BGS staff and AHS staff, is it next week? That are
Correct.
doing site visits and they're in downtown Burlington to potential space for these employees. So that work is already happening.
Great.
Just to provide that update. And that, Jennifer,
They're looking at either 4 to 5 locations.
Yeah.
Right, and just wanted, you might just wanna say provide local client services.
Okay, I'm just trying to go over some other more language. Everybody, committee, everybody satisfied with all of that? That was
Yeah, I'm
good.
just curious, the Waterbury, did I miss this? Is Waterbury already refusal too? That number B?
Oh,
on
okay, yeah.
Watson Hall? Like, I don't.
Waterbury is different. That's very
Talk to us,
different.
explain that to us, because it sounded like you really didn't have, I'll let you explain it, Bill, whether it's paraphrasing.
Remind me, I'm sure you've been on this 50 times.
We had been approached a few times by the town of Waterbury about a parcel on the Waterbury State Office Complex that they would like to develop into low-income housing. It was where Stanley and Wasson stood during Tropical Storm Irene, and they were flooded. And in order to keep those buildings, we would have actually had to have elevated them because they're in the floodplain as it stands right now. And so that was gonna be costly and a lot of work. Originally, Historic Preservation was going to make us keep those buildings, but we worked with them to allow us to demolish so long as we did photo documentation, which is what we did. So about a year ago, we demolished those buildings and we restored the site. It's a nice little green area. And now the town of Waterbury would like to utilize that location. This language is different in that it is a little bit of a waterfall. So the language requires us to go to all state agencies and departments in the state of Vermont and say, are there any potential future uses for this site for the state? Only until after that process is done can we then go to the town of Waterbury and say, would you like to purchase it? If they tell us no, they don't want to purchase it, we don't have authorization to sell that parcel. So this is specific to the town of Waterbury in terms of their request.
So, okay. Would that mean that you could sell it to someone else, or would that mean you could rent it to Waterbury?
So the way the language is written, I only have the ability to either another state agency or department says, hey, I want that land because I want to build X, Y, Z, or I need it for X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
If they say no, then my next step is to go to the town of Waterbury and say, would you like to purchase it? If they say yes, then we continue an ongoing dialogue about the sale price. If they say no, then I don't have the ability to sell it to anybody else
Or rent
or rent it.
Do they want prison?
it?
We have one of those, So right now it's just a giant green space.
Okay.
And I think, again, our concern, as the Commissioner indicated, it's a waterfall process, but if at the end of that process, there is the ability to sell it, that we would like some time frame for the town to have to, set that offer and move forward with it.
And that's not in this language?
No.
So we should add that too. Except within 1 year of financing.
Is this
That's
order,
108.
that's Jerry's.
108.
No, that's 108.
That's sorry. That's close.
is the order of the items under 2 the way you want it? Do you want the select board to take formal action before you conduct the site survey of the properties? I would think you'd wanna look at the properties.
So we've actually already done a subdivision and we have an estimate on what that land is worth. We did that over the fall. This does require the town of Waterbury to take formal action indicating their interest. Then it talks about the subdivision work, which we've already done. Then the next step would be, we determine that no other state agency or department is interested. So
Is that the order that you wanted in, or does the order even matter?
well, I think this order is okay, but it would be great if A had a time frame around it. So if we're gonna ask them to take formal action, can we ask them to take formal action within a certain time frame?
And there's a deed restriction in subdivision D that it has to go to housing.
As what, how the, way the language is written, that is correct.
So they couldn't open retail space there.
That is correct. They would really like to develop it for lower income housing, is my understanding.
Which they did on the other side of the complex, one of the
Yes,
buildings.
correct.
Flat homes.
So what's a fair timeline?
I mean, all they have to do is say that they're interested. Right, it says interest in purchasing and acquiring the property, it doesn't say they have to. So I would say 90 days, just tell us if you're interested in pursuing it is reasonable.
So like by October first,
Yeah.
like so from when this became law.
Yeah, just to say whether or not they're interested.
Yeah.
And then if they're not interested, then we won't do those other things.
Right.
If they are interested, obviously, we continue through the steps.
90 days of passage of the bill, that sounds reasonable, because they're already thinking about it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
instead of saying whether they want to pursue it or not.
Is it a large enough amount they're gonna have to bond for it, or?
I'm trying to remember. Let me look in my emails.
You don't have to, I was just
Find it.
curious.
I have all of them, I just didn't bring them with me.
Because that might occasion a little bit more of a process.
But the way this is, they just have to tell us that they're interested. That's step one. Then I do the subdivision, which I've already done. Then we go to agencies and departments. So there's time baked in there. So they just have to say, yep, we would like to continue to talk to you.
All right, okay.
But they're also, where was I going to show?
One, item three.
So if you look at item 3, we get all the way to the waterfall.
111.
If the town rejects or fails to accept the offer in a timely manner, the commissioner of BGS shall require approval from the General Assembly to sell to another party. But I guess where it says timely manner, it would be nice to
90 days.
to define that. Because that's subject to interpretation, your timely might be different than mine.
And that is even if the state's interested in selling that property, subdividing and selling.
Correct.
All the property.
So maybe 90 days there as well?
Because the offer would include a price and any conditions. They would
That's
know.
correct.
Committee, are you good with that? Everybody,
Yeah, are you able to tell the town, just, heads up in case they have any issues since they've been working with this for a while? Or is that something we do?
The town has been working with the local representative from Waterbury, which I believe is how the language got into the bill. The town of Waterbury over the summer was contacting BGS and ACCD, and we had an on-site meeting. I would assume at some point, we will hear back from the town again, the ACCD and BGS, to continue those conversations.
I just like to let folks know when we change conditions that they're.
Yes, I have not been working with, I haven't been going back and forth with the town on this language.
so no changes in that, then, committee, is that what we
No,
hearing?
no, I think this is fine.
Okay,
Well, that's within 90 days of receipt. The second.
no, I mean, I'm
one,
talking about
first
the
one.
Waterbury one, I'm talking about the,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, I thought we would say in A, that they would take formal action indicating the purchase
interest.
within 90 days of passage of the bill.
Okay.
And then in number 3, if they reject or fail to accept the offer within 90 days of receipt of the offer.
That is correct.
does that work?
That does work.
And you'll get us language with that?
Yes, we will.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for that. We good on that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So on to a little bit more. I'm just gonna say, Commissioner and Mr. Brown, we find some of the reporting language, asking BGS to report, on monthly reports on some sections, probably more than what it needs to be, so we're gonna strike down a lot of that language. We are going to hold you to the fire on what?
Page 35.
We are going to.
Section 24, section 24.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we would, our proposal, I think, as I testified on Friday, would be to have the report just be due on January 15th, 2024, and not have those monthly updates. But
Right.
we just file it on or before that date.
We're going to be pretty focused in on the progress that is not dictated by you, but it is some of site acquisition for a women's facility. And we're gonna really wanna know where that's at. And I can tell you why. And it's not that you don't want to be successful with what you do. I understand all of that stuff. But we have 108 people in a facility that it's probably not a good facility to be. And there's so many things that we do in this job that doesn't affect people. Oh, we're gonna sell a building. Okay, we're gonna sell a building. Boom, boom, boom. But we're talking about building another facility and making people's lives better, and getting them out of a building that they probably shouldn't be in at this point in time, in our opinions. And so we are going to be very, very focused on progress on citing a new women's facility, prison and reentry program. And so we're gonna be very, very concerned about where that progress is being. And our intent isn't to micromanage, but I will tell you, our intent is to push. And
we appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and I think a great message for everyone is one of the most challenging things is citing any type of agency of human services facility. And there's a lot of people that say not in my backyard. Now, I can understand. At the same time, this is a community. Vermont is one giant community, and we have an obligation to take care of Vermonters. So what I would also ask is to have some support from our leaders in our communities to support the idea of citing this facility in one of the communities, because until a community stands up and raises their hand and says, we embrace you, please come to our community, we're gonna be stuck and we're not gonna be able to move forward. And you are correct, citing is in the critical path. I can't get much further with that project until we have a property. So I would just ask to have some support at the legislative level as well in your communities.
we're not gonna,
Fairness.
it's fair, we're just going to wanna know where you're at with it.
Happy
Probably-
to do that.
Probably, yeah, probably it says in the bill.
Happy to do that. I think the only other thing that I want to be eyes wide open about in terms of the amount of the monthly reporting, over the life of a project, depending on where you are with that project, things are happening, but in terms of any major updates. So when I go into schematic design might be a year. If you ask me this month, I'll say, well, we're 10% complete with schematic design. I tell you next month, I'm 20% complete with schematic design. We're getting through it. There's a process. We're moving through it, but I don't really have anything to share with you, right? Because we're in the middle of a process. So happy to give updates. Just want to have the understanding that depending on where the project is during that phase.
Notify the chairs, both House and Senate.
Right.
And if they feel it's important, they can call a meeting.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
And happy to do all that. I just want to be eyes wide open about those types of updates.
Just notify both chairs. If something
Yep.
serious you need, in the last resort, they can call a meeting and we can, do something. 'Cause we're on call.
And the other thing that I have to read the language more clearly, but the other piece to this is anytime there's hold points in a bill, it creates delays in the project. So let's say the opposite is true. Let's say the opposite's true and we find land in June. I'm not saying that is going to happen, just throwing it out there. If I find land in June and I feel like there was a hold point where we had to wait till a certain date, now I have to wait. But I could be wrong on that because the language has changed a couple of times. So it would be better to read, hey, BGS, when you find a piece of land, right, or you've identified where you want to site a facility, please happy to notify whoever you'd like us to. But by putting a date, I think there's a date in there if I remember correctly.
There's two, so there's one that says September 15th and another one December 15th. You sort of get status reports. And then, as Mr. Brown pointed out, January 15th of 24, you have to submit a site location proposal. So to me, I don't know, it seems like a lot of reporting, but
Well, it's more, and I'm fine, I'm just saying that if I find land in June, then it would be great to say, hey, we found land in June, so that we can keep moving.
yeah, is this?
But-
Well, I don't think anybody's gonna complain that you missed a report as long as there was progress previous,
Yeah,
And we believe the honor before land would allow the commissioner. to
Yeah.
file
is it
a
on or
report.
before?
Yeah,
Okay,
in
oh, okay,
August,
perfect,
in August.
perfect,
Well, the final one is.
perfect.
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't
You
see
But
that.
no later, but we should say no later than January 15th, or
Right.
something to that effect.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
I didn't see
So
that
that if
before.
it's sooner, we can do that. and then-
Right, exactly.
Yeah, as soon as we
Yeah.
find land, like, we wanna.
But we agree with Senator Collmore, like starting in September and then filing in October and November, just an update we don't believe is necessary. We will file it just once it's ready and then no later than.
That's where I started yesterday, and then I said, I gave in.
I just need to make sure
I know,
we need some pushing.
It's 4 reports, September, October, November, December, it's 4 reports.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's how you
That's
should.
about the only,
monthly
that's
status.
about the only area that's the only area, and there was about 3 others that we've struck out of here. And, because we just thought it was redundancy and we kind of know where it might be coming from. And, but regardless of that, I just, I can't tell you, on both sides. And I know that you guys feel the same way too. I really, really do. Sometimes somebody needs a little bit more attention and they wanna know that things are serious. And,
And we feel the urgency too, right? Chittenden is a facility underneath the jurisdiction of the BGS commissioner,
Yeah.
so I would like to get out of that building myself. So we're all mutually motivated, I would say. I'm happy to be transparent, no problem about that. And again, the most critical piece will be a community that's willing to open their arms. And so as much support as we can get in that area, the faster we can move forward. But we can't do it alone. We need people that are supporting our efforts.
yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To that end, is there a list of things we can take to a town manager? We need 20 acres, it can't be zone commercial. Is there something that
Yes.
we can take as pedestrian
Yes.
legislator to talk to someone like that? Or is
Yes.
it already designed and I just haven't done it?
No, well, we have it, but we haven't written it down for you.
Because if it were
So-
deployed, then I could make that pitch to my 4
Yes.
towns. And if they say no, then I've done my due diligence
I-
in helping you.
I think that that is a great idea.
Because I'm always looking for excuses to call the town manager anyway.
I think that's a great idea.
That little connection.
Yeah, this will be a great
Still
one.
working for you.
I think
Well,
that's a
how many
great idea.
employees you might want, I mean,
I
people are
think
looking.
it's a,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's a great idea, and the other thing that I just wanna say about these facilities, and, you know, Newport raised their hand the last time, because we weren't even gonna cite it in Newport, maybe Senator Ingles was there at the time, but Newport raised their hands because when we come to a community and we build a facility in your town, we also make a lot of investments in your
Yeah.
town. And we bring a lot of workers into your town, right? So they're supporting economic development. So it's actually a really positive thing for a community to have this type of facility in their community. So yes, I think it would be great to give a list of both what we're looking for, but also what the benefits to the community are, right? To help really, to help support us moving forward.
And sometimes that's very difficult for the voters of the town. The town might want it badly, but the voters say no. So you know what's happening in that facility, and that for the juvenile. No, I know, just 2 or 3 people are holding that thing up for last year.
But to Irene's point, putting my sales hat on, this will be a transformative sort of institution. It's not just building another prison.
Right.
This is something that,
And that leads us into the next part of it.
and
And
you
so.
can sell it that way.
I would.
So the next part of
That's
it probably will have to be with DOC here as well, but we just want to give you a heads up because you're part of it. We just want to make sure that, I'll just kind of read on section 22. The Department of Buildings and General Services shall coordinate with the Department of Corrections on the design and planning for any maintenance, renovation, construction to a state correctional facility to ensure that evidence-based design principles for wellness environments are incorporated into the design and planning phase of a project. And it goes on. I mean, I think the intent is to have a program like we have in Maine. I mean, I think that's what the intent is.
Yeah.
Our intent is to get them out of Chittenden and getting them into a new facility. Yes, we would like to envision a program like Maine. Is this restricting, is this going to restrict enough to where we won't be able to make a decision on what type of building we're going to build, or is it going to slow the project down? I just want to make sure there's not language in there that is being very, very restrictive to where it doesn't give other decisions to be made.
So the Department of Corrections has chosen to use trauma-informed and gender-informed. And when you look up those definitions and then you look up this definition, they're equivalent to each other. So we're using different terms that essentially mean the same thing. But what that equates to is things like additional lighting, natural lighting from the outside, being able to sort of incorporate some of the natural elements inside. So that might be a certain paint color that you use to mimic that outdoor color that you see. It could be higher ceilings, for example. It could be dampening noises within the facility, so it's not so noisy. It's those kinds of elements, and DOC is choosing to move forward with those. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but we serve them, and that is the two things that we've been focusing on, both gender informed and trauma informed, which does equal this other title that is being, or phrase that's being used in the bill.
So it's equal language. Okay.
But Sabrina Karish, who's the project manager, will come in and speak more about that tomorrow afternoon.
And maybe the language should be similar.
That was one of the things I actually mentioned, thank you, Senator. That was one of the things that I mentioned this morning too, because the issue is we're gonna put out a report using our terms, but there's a different term in this bill. And yes, one of the things I pointed out is that confusing? And so we did have a conversation about that this morning.
Or add your language and their language all in there.
Or it could be I don't know if you use parentheses in legislative bills, but we could do parentheses, means this.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and it's not restrictive, and that if it's, so you kind of answered that question.
No, the only thing that I will mention is there could be an impact to the cost of the facility. So if I build higher ceilings, that will cost you more than building, standard height ceiling. So it will impact the cost of the project.
Right, but overall, we understand that those are generally less expensive than the traditional prison model. Well, that's what we heard.
So
from
for reentry,
Amanda.
for reentry, that's correct, because reentry is like a college dorm, right? So think about a college dorm.
Right.
Versus standard correctional is more akin to what you would envision in your head, so more like block wall construction, those
Right.
kinds of things. And so when you're building a college dorm, that is less, it costs less than if I'm building more of a more typical correctional facility.
Right, but I understood that was the case with the correctional facility too.
So the correctional facility will still continue to, it will be trauma informed and gender informed, but it will be harder. It will be a harder facility. When I say harder, I mean things like your wall.
Oh, yeah.
So this will be
than
harder.
the other one. No, I
Yeah,
understand, and I went to Maine, it's
Did you see it? You saw
I saw
reentry,
both of
did you
them.
see the other section, the medium?
the prison part?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
okay,
Yeah.
so that's,
yeah, with like wood doors instead of metal doors, and in the secure area.
correct. So yes, the units were still like a standard unit that you would see today.
Yes,
You are correct. The doors around common spaces were wooden. You are
Yes.
correct on that.
yes, so, and I understood it was generally less expensive than the traditional.
I think the other unit you went into was the minimum security, not the medium, the maximum security.
I'll show you the pictures, I mean,
Because I know where if you walked out to their day room, there was 2 levels, glass wall.
we went to that one,
That one had wood doors, the other facility, their medium facility, that you need card access to get through and main control operated, those were with metal doors.
I'll show you the photos, but we did go into controlled area. There was an area that they didn't yet have people in, there was a control section, where both doors were locked, and we went into the next, and it had a console for a staff person and 2 levels with railings. I mean, very similar kinds of things than we have like at, my reference is Springfield, but a lot larger. And then it had places where you could isolate people if you needed to in the same facility, so you didn't have to take them to another place. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the most secure. But I'll show you the photos.
First of all, we were just talking about parity between the wages of legislators and the average Vermonter. Well, we're looking at these high ceilings, how could we deny people in the reentry facility nice high ceilings? For parity's sake. But my serious question has to do with, do you ever partner up with other folks when you're building these facilities? For example, I'm thinking the Community Justice Center in Essex Junction rent space, they have for a long time. We're talking about restorative justice and some of that stuff. What are the odds that you might partner with someone like that and build a little nook that could be used for that, since some of these common justice important people would.
So, and I just want to get it on the record, so I am super supportive of the Maine reentry model and everything that Maine is doing. I've been one of the cheerleaders from the very beginning as soon as I saw it, so I think it's fantastic and I love it, and I feel like Maine is our big brother and Vermont is the little sister, right? Because they're ahead of us in many different ways, but very inspiring. The 2 times that I've gone there, it's been an inspiration. for many different reasons. But where I was going with all of that is absolutely, so there's a few different things, and there's language in this bill, or maybe a separate bill, I can't remember, around having a stakeholder group that's giving that input and that feedback. And so I'm gonna go a couple different places for your questions. But one is, we have an existing stakeholder group. DOC is leading it, but we are obviously there listening and incorporating what we're hearing right into the concept plan. So that's happening, and they've met 4 times, is my understanding. Sabrina Karish will be here tomorrow, has been sitting in on those meetings, so she's hearing it directly. So we have the stakeholder group. The other thing we're doing is HOK, which you had a presentation with them before. They're international. This is one of their areas of expertise. And so we have somebody where, this is what they do, is design mental health care, correctional facilities, those kinds of things. And they're really leading in the nation in this area. So we have their technical expertise as well. And again, we're relying on other states and getting that feedback from Maine, for example. So we've got lots of partnerships. Lots of folks we're working with. We're always open to feedback and input from others. If there's someone who you have identified that you feel, may provide some valuable feedback and input, and they're not already on the stakeholder group, or they don't have a way to provide that feedback, happy to do that. So it's just a matter of connecting if they're not already working with the stakeholder group.
But as far as building into that facility for another group, that would
You say-
working, like if you've got a community justice center like Essex has.
Yep.
They're looking for space that they can either own or rent less expensively or whatever, just be more sensible than where they are in Essex Junction. Doesn't make sense to have them talking with you about having a
Oh,
nook
you
of
mean
that
a portion in the building?
A nook of that building or something on the campus, because they are dealing with some of the same personnel. I don't know, just
That
a
would,
weird thought.
well, it would be good to know, like, if we have providers or people that are supporting these women, it would be good to know who those are, and be good to have those in the, as part of the conversation. There are rules and statute around what I can do in terms of leasing and subleasing space on state property. So there's a whole bunch of that. It is possible. There's just a lot of processes that we
I
have
think the state's
to put into place.
partially funds.
Good to know. But you and I, we're happy to offline.
Okay, I was
with
I was
you.
just curious.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't talked about any of this, it just occurred to me for a second.
But yes, we do have the ability to sublease the whole process.
And corrections too.
Of course.
Yes, agreed.
Like I know Lund runs a program at the Chittenden facility now as staff.
But I think when you bring in a different group, security, distance, and sound, all that comes into play, but it's not, depends on the site, it could be doable.
Just 2 quick things.
Yeah, go
I sent photos to Linda just now that are the correctional facility, so you can let me know what level it was. And she can share them. And then the second thing is, when we were talking about this in our caucus, folks brought up the detainees. Is
Yes,
there any conversation at all about having the detainees be detained elsewhere other than the prisons?
I'm not aware of that conversation, but that would be a good question for the Department of Corrections.
Okay.
And the other 2 other ones,
On page 36, lines 12 through 15. Was that something we were going to consider?
36, 12 through 15. Well, talk to us about that, guys.
I don't think we asked for this language.
No.
It was put into the bill.
I thought that we had talked about it, but I want to be sure.
So I guess, the answer to your question is we're gonna do this. We weren't necessarily going to talk to the city of Barry, but any of the towns that we're in, we're always a partner with, and we try to always make sure that we're having ongoing conversations about anything that we're doing around space within their communities. So I don't see that as a challenge. The other thing that I was going to say is we will look at setting this at an alternate location anyway, because what happens, especially with this one, this is the courthouse that gets the most amount of cases. And so to build swing space for a courthouse is extremely, extremely expensive. So we're gonna run various alternatives we're planning now, and we're gonna look at how much money it's gonna cost us to either provide them swing space and then either renovate or build new in this location, Or we would do another cost analysis to show what it would cost us to build in an alternate location for a permanent facility while leaving them where they are now, and not disrupting their operations. So we're gonna go through that whole planning study. We will have an outcome. We always talk to our communities. So the language is in there. It's fine. It doesn't harm us in any way.
But my question, I guess, well, you've done it anyway.
Right, no, we always work with our communities. So we would be doing this anyway.
Well, but if you're not, I'm happy with it. And then the last one, I think you already covered this, Mr. Chair. On page 38, lines 18, 19, and 20. I believe we struck.
Yeah, we did strike that. So talking about the cash fund, I know, Mr. Brown, we were gonna talk some more about that. And I think you're probably aware of this, but in case you're not, in my conversation with Senator Kitchell the other day, she is restoring the funding mechanism to that. She's going to say not to exceed 4%. She wasn't quite sure whether she was gonna make it all come from general funds, or where she was gonna get the money from, but she was gonna restore that fund, the funding mechanism that the House had taken out. And so we really can't do much with that language on that cash fund until I get back to what she's done.
Yeah, my understanding is some language might need being drafted.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you're aware, but I want to bring it up and to make you aware. And so we'll take a peek at that when that happens. Anything else, guys, for us, committee, anything else while we have? Yes.
I do have one clarification, and thanks to the millions of people out there watching on YouTube.
Yes, we appreciate our watcher, our
I
viewer.
misspoke on the number for ARPA funds. I said 1.8 million. It's actually 1.5 million.
Okay.
And someone caught that?
Someone caught that.
Did they get a prize?
Me too.
Cool.
Me too. It might be free babysitting services, just so you know, but yes.
Oh.
Well, it's a lot more, that's a conversation one I had when I made a mistake the other day, Joe, so you're doing better.
You know, it'd be a good place for this facility. I was thinking about 40th now, there's a lot of land up there.
Or Ethan out, that's owned by Free Trans?
Well, they have a
They have
building,
it.
there. They have, they don't own it, they have a site. There's a lot of nice space on that, and it doesn't surround by housing or anything.
Buses go by.
Yeah, what's the deal about it?
Oh, yeah, right there. Beautiful spot. I don't know, development price, where people be upset, acres and acres there. I don't know who-
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. It's a lot of tons of space, but,
There's this culture.
Depends
That
on
lines,
where
the
you
lines
get
right
it.
there.
Might be
Yeah.
nice.
Is it
You
next
know,
to
by
Moody's
downtown, just-
Oh.
Yeah.
Thought,
That's a great idea.
The town lines for Winooski, Colchester, and Essex are really
Tight.
interesting. in that
Yeah.
I will tell you, Essex has been a great partner. They were a great partner with Woodside, and then when we put in the mental health care facility, same thing, great partner.
Oh, we have some more.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
Friday.
Yes.
Answer your question.
Yeah, no, we had a good
Good,
chat.
good, good.
Sure, good? You guys are good? You guys got some language coming back to us?
Yes,
And,
got it.
Get that. And thank you very much. Thank you for coming in. We covered a lot of ground and we're getting close.
I know, that was rapid fire.
Well, we're.
I would make a joke about